model warning.
What's up, YouTube? You checking out the Frequent Flyer, and I'd like to welcome you guys back to my RC Chop Shop. Today is a rather simple plug and play build of the Beta75 Pro, and so everything is pretty much straightforward. All the motors are plug and play. I ended up using the older BetaFPV F4 version of the flight controller, but it all worked out well because this one has a buzzer and the newer one doesn't. The only thing missing from this one here is smart audio, and I really don't need that for indoors. I'm primarily going to be flying this one indoors. Although it's plug and play, there is a little bit of soldering you have to do. The pads on top you have to solder for the buzzer. I didn't have a buzzer for this one here. I want to use one of those tiny buzzers, but I did solder up the pads for future use, and I had to solder up the pads for the receiver and the OSD and camera info and all of that. Now this is the hardest part of the whole build. A lot of people have problems with soldering. I know I have problems soldering with really small connectors, and this is pretty small, but I do manage to get past it. And I think the key is making sure that your soldering iron is very hot, and that way you don't have to spend a lot of time on the pads. When you just tap the pads and you already have solder on them, it seems like it's a whole lot easier to get these wires to line up and all. Might be just me, but that's my method and it seems to work really well. And so here I'm about to solder up a super tiny DSMX receiver that I got from Full Speed RC. Maybe the smallest I've ever seen. And so once you get those wires tinned up, it's very easy to just tap them in place there. And so I'm using some transparent heat shrink to protect the receiver, and I'm just going to fold that underneath the flight controller. And so now it's time for this. This is the all-in-one VTX camera solution from BoldClash, but this is their new version that includes smart audio, but I'm not going to be using smart audio. So I'm just going to disregard that one pin and use the 4 pins that's included with that. And so just tinning up the wires here and just tapping them in place there. Once you get the wires tinned up and you have your soldering pads already tinned up, it's very easy to just tap them in place as long as your soldering iron is pretty hot. So now it's time to get the motors in the frame. Now this part of the build is super easy. All you have to do is plug it in because it's plug and play. So you just make sure you line up the screws for the motors there. Just get the motors in there nice and tight. Now one thing to note is that the motor screws go through the circle holes. Do not put them through the triangular holes. They go through the circle holes, and it's just 3 of them. So make sure they're in nice and tight. And that's just about it for this build. Everything is already done. Just make sure you plug your motor wires in. I use the little screwdriver to get in there. It's pretty hard to do it with your hands. And so I use my screwdriver to do a little maintenance on my wires to get them in the right place. As you can see, I have them curved on the side there, out of the way. One of the motor wires were up in the way of the prop line, so I used the screwdriver to get those out and just curve them around the side there like I got the rest of them. And so that's just about it for this build. Let's check this thing out in flight outside.